Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast brought to you by Fantrax. I'm your host, James Anderson, and we are joined today by the great Steve Weimer, one of the best players out there. I mean, if you play in a 15-team league with Steve Weimer, statistically, he has a better than 1 in 3 chance of winning the league and a better than 3 in 4 chance of cashing in the league, while you, the average drafter, have less than a 5% chance of winning the league. So Steve Weimer, one of the greats. Really appreciate you coming back on the show, Steve. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I don't think I'm doing as well as you made that sound right there. That can't. I don't think those numbers can be quite right, but I hope you're right. But yeah, doing okay.
So, how many drafts have you done so far? Which I assume probably mostly DCs.
Yeah, I'm in my like 9th or 10th DC. One more to go. Definitely ready to make the transition to Fab Leagues and kind of different mindset and be a little bit more aggressive. And I do some best balls as well, just like I don't know, out of boredom more than anything else. I don't really know what I'm doing there. But yeah, just those 2 formats so far. But pretty soon, hopefully transition to like an OC or 2. And I know there's like a DC auction coming up, which is always a lot of fun. So
Yeah, absolutely. I've got my DC auction coming up here in a little less than 2 weeks. I know yours is a little over 2 weeks away. Saw you in that one. I hopped in the other one. It was more of a tiebreaker than anything else. I don't mind playing in leagues with you, Steve, but I'm already kind of contractually obligated to be in one league with you, the Meatball Too Early League. So, which you've won back-to-back years, by the way. That's enough for me. What's your favorite NFBC contest? Because for me, I think the 500 DC auction might be my favorite. I love the main event as well, but what's your favorite?
yeah, I think it's probably that DC auction, kind of best of both worlds, I guess. I could do like DCs a lot, and the auction I think actually like adds a nice element to DCs, and it fits better for my auction style. Like I like auctions in general, but I tend to be like probably too conservative, like spreading the wealth or spreading the risk. But that I think fits a lot better in the DC like context. So that's a good mix, I think, for me. Yeah, so I'd say probably that.
Yeah, and you've been doing those ever since I've been doing them. Probably for what, like three plus years or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. It's always a rush to get in them since they refuse to do more for whatever reason. Yeah, so hopefully every year they'll. I think they did a couple of like more private ones this year, but they get a lot of requests to open up more than just the 2 at the $500 price point. I think they could probably sell out more, depending on what happens to be listening. But as it stands, you kind of have to pay close attention to when they open up and try to get one of those spots.
Yeah, absolutely. The 500 DC, we'll take more of those if you're listening, Greg. But let's talk more about some like specific players here, Steve. I want to ask you about. I'm kind of calling these sort of like extreme hitters. Like I think the consensus best way to sort of build an offense is to get like well-rounded hitters who come close to being positives in all 5 categories whenever possible. I mean, I know I'm oversimplifying that, but like I noticed in your Meatball DC this year, you collected a handful of hitters early that have sort of extreme strengths and weaknesses. You had Oneil Cruz early, Luis Robert, Willy Adames, and then you also kind of backfilled with some guys on the other end of that extreme, like your Yandy Diaz, Nico Horner, Gabriel Moreno, Brendan Donovan types. And so I had a couple theories behind this. Obviously one is just that you can build batting average backwards, especially if you're the only one in your league who's kind of trying to go that route. And then my sort of more out there kind of crazy theory, which would only really apply to someone like you if you were sort of confident enough in your ability to kind of backfill the roster, was that if you have a bunch of these guys that are just really elite in one category, like stolen bases with some power, like an Oneil Cruz or Luis Robert, or you're just an extreme kind of batting average guy, like a Brendan Donovan or Yandy Diaz, you can kind of use those as buttons to sort of push or pull back on in certain categories in a DC throughout the season, so that you're kind of getting the exact amount of stats you need to climb to the level you're trying to get in a certain category. And so I was just wondering if like either of those theories really rang true for you in terms of like that kind of build that you had in that meatball DC, and then also just like if you think these sort of good in power, speed, mediocre batting average guys are undervalued, or if the good batting average, bad power guys are also undervalued, just because it is a bit more challenging to build around those two different types.
Yeah. So like the meatball DC, I never know how to prepare for that. That's just kind of random, and I definitely went way too early on Oneil Cruz, and probably a few other players. And then part of it is just like then try to like claw back some average, I guess, later. So like once you go for one type, then you have more reason to try to complement. But in general, I do think that I agree that that idea you mentioned, like find well-rounded players, like it's definitely consensus. You hear it a lot. Like a lot of things, there's some wisdom in it, but like when it becomes too common practice, right? It creates opportunities to zag, like where other people are zigging. So like if enough people are making a point of that and passing over the lower average people or the individuals that are specialists in some way, then like they become values, right? So it creates opportunities to do that. Like I was looking back, these aren't like power speed guys, obviously, but last year Steamer had like the two lowest projected averages among full-time hitters were Cal Raleigh and Kyle Schwarber, right? And they were what, third and sixth on the player rater. So if in every league there's a few people that pass them over because they've heard over and over like they need to protect their batting average early, then it just leaves value for someone else to take advantage of it. And like just more generally, like there's 14 hitting spots, there's 27 weeks. There's a lot of time to make up for like a deficit in one category if you build it up early, especially I think if that category is batting average, because it's like the most variable. We can't predict it really well. So that's where like a lot of those specialists, I think this idea that you mentioned about like having the buttons to push later, comes in handy, because you don't really know with a whole lot of confidence, I don't think, like what your categorical strengths or weaknesses will be coming out of a draft. Like it's not going to be exactly what you expect oftentimes. So having like some options to address whatever needs actually arise, like so not just anticipated, but when it comes to be July and you do have like a need for average or steals, having someone that can address that I think is valuable, especially in like a DC where you have tons of roster spots. You can afford to have a few of those types.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned just kind of the meatball DC, just not, you didn't put like that much thought into it or whatever. Like is Oneil Cruz, is that someone you've gotten again, like since the price has like probably been quite a bit cheaper than you went for him in that one, or is that your only share?
I've got at least one other, maybe a couple, but I still have passed a couple times, even where it seems like it is a value. I don't know. I think that there's definitely value there. I think that I think I took him 30th overall, which is going to look silly. And already looks silly in retrospect, but like the skills, some of the core skills are there. This platoon kind of that worries me more than anything. The batting average, like I think it's okay to take a gamble on some of those people where like the steals provide a nice floor, and you don't expect him to hit for as low as average as he did last year. So I can see doing it some more. I think I did get him in like the one other like auction that I did. And I think he might be a good kind of piece there where you have more kind of flexibility to build around it if you need to.
And it's not, I don't like everyone's sort of, oh man, like Oneil Cruz coming off this bad year. I'm with you. I think the platoon is much more troubling. But like, it doesn't, like if we kind of can take ourselves back to like a year ago, like I don't think anyone is viewing Cruz as more of a batting average liability than they were Schwarber and Raleigh a year ago, like to your point, right? So that doesn't mean he's just going to do what those guys did and exceed his batting average projection by 30, 40 points or whatever. But just the fact that we know he's going to run a bunch, like, and he's discounted based off of the down year, it definitely makes sense as a nice roto piece. But that platoon, he is like when I had Phil Dussault on a couple weeks ago, Cruz is the highest drafted outfielder who's going to be in a platoon by just like leaps and bounds, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he is the type, like in terms of like stats per game or per plate appearance. Like he's, one of the few people that can make up for that, and get you full like value on 2/3 of the playing time. But obviously it'd be better if there were more of an obvious path to getting, 85% of the playing time or something like that.
So I want to ask you, last year you came on the show and I was asking you about basically trying to look for that year's Jose Abreu, because back in 2024, if people can remember that far back, Jose Abreu was like getting drafted around, pick 300 or whatever. He was still under contract with the Astros, but then he was quickly just washed up and out of the league. So we're trying to figure out which guys might be traps and just might be washed pretty early after opening day. And we discussed George Springer as a potential candidate, was coming off a down year. You very correctly identified on last year's pod that George Springer was someone that still had good seasons left in the tank and was not someone we should avoid for fear of potentially kind of falling off a cliff. And obviously George Springer was on a lot of league winning rosters last year. So I kind of wanted to go back or go down that road again and look at some of these old hitters and see if we see maybe a potential this year's George Springer, while also kind of looking for potential guys that could really fall off a cliff. So I wanted to start with just like a group of guys, and we're not going to go through more than one or two of these guys maybe, but just wanted to read some of the old guys who are coming off of good years. So we've got like Freddie Freeman, Salvador Perez, George Springer, Christian Yelich, Jose Altuve, Teoscar Hernandez, Trevor Story, Eugenio Suarez, Jurickson Profar, Xander Bogaerts, Jorge Polanco, Max Muncy, and John Carlos Stanton. They're all fairly old, 31, 32 at the youngest. It's such a young man's game right now, Steve. Like, it's really hard to find that many guys who are kind of in their mid 30s and are getting drafted high. But did any of those just older hitters who are coming off of good years stand out as being risks to sort of fall off, just due to sort of where they're at on the aging curve and the fact that they're still getting drafted fairly high based on how they performed in 2025?
Yeah, it was tough. This was a tough assignment because like most of them, like I think the market is smart and like have been discounted a little bit, and most of them are still pretty good values, like at least by my numbers. But when I was looking through it, like the two that kind of stood out are Polanco and Story, just because if you look at what they did last year and compare it to like their previous few years, like they made significant gains, both in like strikeout rate and EV, I think in both cases. And you just expect some like natural regression there to begin with, right? And then you add in like the age and injury risk. Like I went back a couple years to try to compare 25 to like what they had, the baseline they had established, and I had to go like 2 or 3 years to get enough like plate appearances, right? Because they missed a lot of time before last year. But I think a lot of it is like priced in. Still like decent values. I think Story's the one that like worries me a little bit more. Like his defense was really bad last year, and it's hard to imagine him like actually losing playing time. But if he's projected for like a 300 OBP and he's making a lot of errors, like is there like a finite leash, I guess? Because I know that like defense was really bad like down the stretch. Maybe that's just random, but it was in like the Boston Press, a lot of errors. I think in September, like 7 of his 19 happened in September, like multiple games with like a couple throwing errors, and probably nothing. But if you're really trying to like pick nits and identify like risks, I'd say there's some there with him at least.
Yeah, and they do kind of have just sort of some guys hanging around. Like they brought in Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Obviously, I think Marcelo Mayer fits better at third base if Story can just kind of do what he did last year. But Mayer probably a better defensive shortstop than Story, and Kiner-Falefa obviously a better defensive shortstop than Story. So like they have some options, even if they're uninspiring options, if they did want to go in a different direction there. yeah, I haven't ended up with any Jorge Polanco, but I definitely should have before when he was still a free agent. I think he was a really good value back then. But yeah, I am wary about paying for just that year came out of nowhere, really.
Yeah.
And now he's on a big deal. This is maybe a more interesting group though, Steve. So this is where we're talking about old hitters who are probably in everyday roles. One of these guys is going to probably be in a platoon, but I want to see if you think any of these guys could really kind of continue a decline that they showed last year and have that sort of Jose Abreu risk, and then maybe see if any of these guys, because this is the group that Springer would have been in last year. He had a below league average year in 2024, and see if any of these guys might actually have that type of resurgence. So old guys coming off down years: Christian Walker of the Astros, Adolis Garcia, newly with the Phillies, JT Realmuto, Marcus Semien, another new Met, and then Cedric Mullins with Tampa Bay, Marcelo Zuna, a new Pirate, and Jorge Soler with the Angels. So let's start with like who you think is like a major risk to just continue the decline they showed last year.
I'd probably say like Soler for sure. And then probably Ozuna, but I didn't actually like look at him as much. I haven't, because I have no interest in him just in general. But Soler is the kind of player that like normally I'd be in on, at least for DCs, where it's like bad team, big contract, like the playing time like should be solid, but his skills like decayed pretty badly last year. And if he's not hitting, like it's not too hard to imagine the Angels just like using Trout more DH to try to keep him healthy and just sitting Soler or eating the contract because it is like the last year. So he's one that's like that could be nothing, I think, by midseason. And then Ozuna, I don't know, like I just don't have too much interest, but I don't, that probably like has a higher baseline, I think, and then probably a longer leash, but I wouldn't expect a huge bounce back at least.
Yeah. I wonder if Ozuna, I assume his ADP will go up now that he's signed. But yeah, we'll put a pin in that Soler discussion. I might bring him up later. But what about do any of these guys stand out as a potential like bounce back up? Obviously, I don't think we're expecting any of these guys to have a year like George Springer did last year, but I know the projections still like a few of these guys quite a bit. So who do you have, one or two of these that you're intrigued by as a potential bounce back candidate?
Yeah, I think the easy choice is Semien. Like it's been pretty like well noted that like he had a bad start after May, pretty much the same guy he has been in terms of skills, and just a lot of like playing time upside. Like the projections are really like harsh on him. I'm sure it's the age and partly like the last year that he missed. I forget how many plate appearances he was. I still think still over 500, but like the previous 6 full seasons, he had over 700 plate appearances, right? And he's now projected for 600. So I think like, good team, probably hitting high in it, has a history of playing every single day. So I think there's playing time upside as well as like a little bit of skills upside just based on like, what the projections are expecting. And then the other one I didn't expect to like, I don't know, be interested in, and I'm glad you asked this because now maybe I will be a little bit more, is Garcia. Playing time not nearly as secure, but the skills really aren't that different like last year compared to what he was doing before. Projections still like it. Strikeouts were a little bit better, I think, than they had been. Barrel rate, sprint speed's not great, but it hasn't been for a few years. So I think it's pretty easy to see him being like a value, at least, not on Springer levels, but, compared to where he's going.
Yeah, definitely. I felt the same way about Garcia when like I've never really been in on Garcia, which was a big mistake from 2021 through 2024, I guess maybe. But he at least had a batting average above 240 from 2021 through 2023, while hitting for a bunch of power and some speed. And then obviously just tailing off a little bit from that career year in 2023, but the projections really I was surprised by how much they like Garcia with the Phillies. Like ATC has him for 234 with 23 homers and 11 steals, but like Oopsie has him for 241 with 25 homers and 14 steals. Like if you can get 241 with 25 homers, 14 steals at pick 230 is where Garcia's going. So I mean, you could be drafting Garcia as like your OF4, OF, maybe even OF5, but probably more like OF4 for me. So yeah, he's intriguing. The Phillies, you know, they like to do that kind of reclamation project that obviously worked great with Jesus Luzardo last year. Did not work well with Max Kepler, but yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of setting things up for Garcia to have at least a couple months of leash as an everyday player there. So
yeah, not a lot of depth really. Like I'm just looking at it. Like behind him, there's not a whole lot of obvious threats. Like it's clear that Castellanos would be gone, and then it's kind of, I mean, you know, obviously the prospect, the farm system does better than I do, but I don't see a whole lot that, you know, would shorten up that leash like more than you're saying. It seems like, yeah, he should have a good chance to establish himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let's head to a quick message from our sponsor. When we come back, I want to get Steve's thoughts on some catchers who I think might be underprojected from a playing time standpoint. But first, Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more, and it's all free. Sign up for free today. Simply go to fantrax.com/rotowire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/rotowire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. All right, Steve. So I might be just wrong about this, and so, or you might just think I'm wrong about this, which you can definitely just say. But I kind of think the public projection systems are under projecting the plate appearances for a few of the very best catchers like Cal Raleigh, William Contreras, Shea Langoliers, Hunter Goodman, and Sal Perez were the five that kind of came to mind for me. And it's not by, I don't think they're being underprojected by a lot, but I think in some cases, like I might even add like 40, 50, 60 plate appearances to some of the projections for these guys, which it might not seem like that much, but it could really kind of lead to them being undervalued in the market if you did add those plate appearances. And I was just curious if you thought I was on anything with any of those five, or if you think I'm just wrong about this.
I was looking through. I thought maybe like the projections are just a little bit harsh on catchers. But this is not like a super thorough examination, but I just compared like the numbers that I have for plate appearances to what they did last year, and it wasn't any lower than on average for catchers than hitters in general. So it doesn't seem like it's that. I don't know. I don't see like huge under projections. It depends on the system. Like as I'm clicking through now, like I see like I was going to mention like depth charts on Fangraphs like only has Cal Raleigh for like 11 more than Sal, and I think like he'll separate more than that, right? He's the one who stood out. But then I looked at like ATC, and it's a little bit more like what I would expect, where like Cal Raleigh's for 631, Contreras 608. I imagine there is just a bit of a reluctance on these systems to like give any catcher much more than 600. So I guess that does create some opportunities, but it doesn't, I don't know, seem glaring to me. So like maybe like explain like why you think so. Do you just see more DH?
Well, I guess like, so I think like I might just be overrating these guys' ability to stay healthy. Like I maybe like I think the projection systems are baking in like the risk that if you're a catcher and you're playing that much, like you're more likely to break down.
Yeah.
So like I definitely that would be where I'm off, is just like not just kind of baking in enough risk that they're gonna miss time. But I do think if like these guys stay, about as healthy as they were last year, I think all the guys I listed will play more than they're projected for. It's just a question of, do they get hurt? Obviously, like Langoliers missed like 3-4 weeks last year with an injury. And he's basically projected to miss that much time again this year, one way or another. But if he doesn't suffer an injury, I think he blows past his projection. And so it's basically just kind of how much do you want to bet on these guys staying healthy or not. But I do think like I think Hunter Goodman's going to play almost every day. I think William Contreras is going to play almost every day. I think Cal Raleigh's going to play almost every day. Same with Sal. So I definitely see a path to all those guys exceeding their playing time projections, but the health is kind of the wild card there.
It makes like the kind of situation I like, where it's like so just on the projections, I generally have catchers at a pretty good value, right? That you don't have to like bump it up, but you can view it as like upside from there. Right? So I'd say that's exactly the kind of situation. Whereas like I don't need this kind of whatever 75th% outcome or whatever to happen to have a value, but like it's there, it's in the realm of possibilities. I think that's the kind of like investment it's good to make.
Have you noticed, like I've noticed that Hunter Goodman just seems to be like one of the most undervalued players in drafts, like relative to just project, like pretty much every projection system has him as like the second catcher, or at least like right there with like Contreras and Langoliers. But he consistently goes, 5th or 6th, and sometimes like a couple rounds after those guys.
Yeah, I agree. He's a huge value by my numbers. I think him and Sal are the two that kind of stand out, like relative to cost.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I want to ask you, Steve, about second base and third base. It seems, at least to me, like shortstop and first base are pretty straightforward. Like you'd really have to mess something up to not get at least one good shortstop and one good first baseman. But I think second base and third base are just a bit more odd. There are a couple of lead options at the top, and then there's a steep drop off, and it almost reminds me of the way catcher used to be. But my question for you is, in terms of how you're approaching second base and third base, who is your worst starting second baseman and your worst starting third baseman so far through all your completed drafts? And then do you find that going cheap at either position is palatable now that you've done 11 plus drafts?
Yeah. So looking through, I think like the worst second baseman that I have is like a starter is probably Gleyber Torres. And then on third base, I have a DC where it was like Shaw and Durbin. So I guess now it's Durbin. Another where Paredes was the first one. So neither of those situations is looking ideal at this point. And like for that reason, I guess, like I think it's totally fine waiting on second base. I think there's like a lot of pockets of potential values, and you don't have to panic at any point. There's like a nice range with like Stoughton and Albies, and if you miss that, then there's like the Semien, like Polanco, Gleyber Torres. Like there's kind of options throughout the draft for second base. You can kind of get it at any point. Third base is a little bit dicier to me. I don't like any ranges really, so it's just a matter of like deciding where it fits in the overall kind of plan and where it's least painful, or at least in terms of the opportunity cost. But yeah, I'd say much more comfortable waiting on second base than third base.
Right. Yeah. So like it's there's more of like a panic at third base of just like, oh crap, like I don't like what I've got here. And then with second base, you don't mind if you're just getting, say, like the 9th best production at second base in your league throughout the year.
I don't mind if I'm getting the 12th best production, probably.
Well, I'm sure you could get the 12th best second baseman, and I feel like you could still manage your way into 9th best second base production.
Yeah, I'm actually like, I don't know if these are good measures, but like I've got something that's like trying to approximate like the cliff, and it's it's just not that steep at second base, right? So like it's pretty smooth drop off right throughout. Whereas like actually shortstop is where there's like the biggest one. But like you said, you should be on before that cliff. And third base is kind of that danger area where there's not a ton of good options and there's a pretty big drop off. So it just requires a little bit more attention, I think.
So yeah, it's I mean, second base. It's just you're never gonna not have a viable option, but it is just kind of, it's weird when there's like 20 options that are all like about the same, and like obviously you don't, it limits your upside in a league if you're only the 10th best in one like position. I mean, do you think like the like Ketel Marte, Jazz Chisholm guys, are they being appropriately priced, or are they being overdrafted just because of that drop?
I think Jazz is a tough call. Like he's got the potential to separate like from the rest of the position. Marte, I don't really like the price on. I think maybe part of it is like a scarcity worry. Like he is obviously like, one of the best, but the difference from him to like your replacement level, wherever exactly that is, I don't think justifies like the early pick. There's more important things to do with that. What is it?
Right.
40th
Right.
pick.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm very intrigued by what Jazz does this year. I've got one share. He's a lot of fun in a DC. Just having that corner middle option gives you just a ton of flexibility. But like you said, if you're taking him second round over ace closer. Speaking of pitchers, Steve, I believe you had a decent amount of Drew Rasmussen last year. Am I wrong about that?
I think so. Decent, probably not enough, but more than average, I guess.
No. Yeah, no, I'm sure nobody had enough Drew Rasmussen last year, but he was obviously very affordable, and that's why you're saying you didn't have enough, because he was going after pick 200. People just weren't very confident in him logging significant innings. He'd thrown around 50 innings the prior 2 years, and then he throws 150 great innings last year, does Drew Rasmussen. And so I was going to try to see if we could identify candidates I've got some candidates. I was going to see if you could identify a leading candidate to be this year's Drew Rasmussen, where you're going after pick 200 and you're someone whose skills, like this is big. Like we trust the skills, and particularly the ratios, the ERA and the WHIP. So we're not that worried about these pitchers sucking when they're out there, but we are just worried a little bit about the workload, and that's why they're going cheap. So I came up with some of these candidates. They're going after pick 200. You can feel free to name someone I didn't list here, but some potential candidates: Chris Bubich with the Royals, Matthew Boyd with the Cubs, Connolly Early with the Red Sox, Shane McClanahan with the Rays, Joe Musgrove with the Padres, Troy Melton with the Tigers, Logan Henderson with the Brewers, Grayson Rodriguez with the Angels, Shamanaya with the Mets, Braxton Ashcraft with the Pirates, and Ryan Weathers with the Yankees. So did one or two of those names jump out to you, Steve?
I think so. And there's different ways of thinking about this, but like what seems interesting about Rasmussen last year is that, like, looking back, it seems kind of like obvious that he could have done that. Like he'd never been bad, right? So like we shouldn't have been too surprised. Like you said, like the skills were always there. So just looking like for that model, then I'd say like probably like Musgrove and McClanahan are the two that, like, for the most part, they've always been good when they're on their mound. Injury concerns of a different, like now immediately coming off of injuries, I don't think Rasmussen was. It was just more like, track record last year. But in terms of people that have like been good, especially with ratios when they're on the mound, it's those two. And like when I mentioned, like, I guess before we start recording, like ready to like take some chances and fab leagues and stuff, like those seem like good types to do that. McClanahan in particular, whereas like, yeah, very easily could be a cut, at some point, but has some upside based on where he's going and based on the history, again, like when he actually has been on the mound.
Yeah, I mean, McClanahan's basically going exactly where Rasmussen was going last year. McClanahan in DCs since the start of the new year, going around pick 240-ish, min of 207, max of 289 for McClanahan. And we got an update from pitching coach Kyle Snyder saying that McClanahan has looked really, really good this offseason and is being totally built up to start, with the expectation he'll be in Tampa Bay's rotation. Yeah, I mean, it's just like you said, is that more of just like a fab league pick for you? Have you taken McClanahan in any DCs?
I think I've got him at least one DC, and it is the kind of pick I think that is very easy to imagine it being, like July and looking back and be like, why didn't I have more? Given that it was so cheap and the potential was there. But I'm not very good at OCs. I don't do a whole lot of them, but he seems like an ideal pick there, where they've got like kind of really high upside, and the replacement level is not as worrisome if you do need to cut him. So yeah, hopefully I can get him in that context.
And then Musgrove is going just like right around the same range, 5 picks earlier. Yeah, I'm kind of upset that I don't have any Musgrove. I think I don't typically mind going after guys if they're this cheap coming back from Tommy John, especially like a veteran. And yeah, like Musgrove, like Oopsie has him for 156 innings, 3.77 ERA, 1.19 WHIP. That's pretty solid as like your SP 5 or 6 or whatever.
Yeah. And it's nice that they're right together, because if you're making like a plan, you can just kind of plan to have like an upside shot in that range.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Steve, this is a first on the pod. I've done well over, man, I don't even know how many pods I've done. Thousands of pods, but I've done over probably 300, 400 of these prospect pods, and I've never had someone ask about a guest coming on who was already booked. And we had someone come into the RotoWire MLB Discord room this past week asking if I was going to have you back on the show this offseason. And I said, you were coming on the very next week. And when I said that, he requested that we both mention some players we're taking at the end of drafts. So I don't expect you to give out all your favorite late round darts or anything like that. But I was wondering if you could we can kind of go back and forth and give a few players that we're taking, roughly rounds like 25 through 30 of drafts, with an eye towards these fab leagues we're about to start drafting. So do you have a player you want to throw out there?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm a little bit reluctant, but I guess I'm mostly done with DCs. And these are easier to pick there, although I think perhaps still have some value, hopefully in fab leagues. So like Denzel Clark is one I think I've gotten a lot. That's kind of been a weird playing time projection. I haven't dug super deep into it, but it's like the numbers just seem really low. I don't see why he wouldn't be like full time if he's healthy. And could be very low average, but as we talked about earlier, like there's ways to make that up, and you never know. You just get a little lucky on BABIP or improve the skills like somewhat, and then it's a good value, I think, at that point.
Yeah, I've got Clark on 2 of my 4 DCs so far. I'm with you. Like I think the playing time, Clark typically gets drafted around pick 400. And he's just like, if they're going to play Tyler Soderstrom in left field all year, they're going to need Clark in center field all year. And I think that they're willing to just let him play through. Like, obviously if he's just like Christian Pache, like they're not going to just let him keep playing. But if he's kind of just what he was last year, I think they will just let him keep playing. And, elite sprint speed, elite bat speed. And, we've seen, when he gets a hold of one, he can hit it. I think he hit one over 470 feet last year. He's 6'5". His big problem was ground balls. One of his big problems was ground balls, but I think he's capable of slightly improving that aspect, and he's had times in the minors where it wasn't that big of a problem for him. So then just the added bonus of playing half his games in that park in Sacramento. So yeah, a lot to like there with Clark. So this is, I mean, I feel I'm second guessing myself here, Steve, because you had some negative things to say about Jorge Soler earlier, but I'll just throw out the fact that I've got Jorge Soler on about half my teams, I think, as well. He's going right around Denzel Clark, again, around pick 400. And I think you're dead on that he could just be out of a job if he's sucking again this year. But you know, the most comparable year of Soler's career, I think, to 2025 was his 2022 season, where his strikeout rate was up around 29%. ISO was below 200. And then he followed that year up with a second career 35 plus homer season. And I think his seasons are just all over the place. Like he's just so, like he sort of strikes me as a guy where it's like, if he had a good off season and like put in the work, like he probably went on to have a good year. And then if he didn't really, then he sucked, because it's just not consistent really year to year with Soler. And he could definitely be washed up. I mean, he's old enough to be washed up. But I think the fact that it's a contract year, like if he wants to get one more big league deal, he has to have a good year this year. Otherwise he's just going to be out of the majors. So I think he will play every day as long as he's performing. And like you said, he might not be performing at all, but I do think there's a chance for a cheap 25 homer season here from Soler with everyday playing time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see it. I'm trying to look at the depth chart. So I guess if they just put Adele in center, right? Like just with the Josh Lowe kind of addition. I haven't really thought through like all the ramifications there, but I think you're right. Like it's a bad enough team that if he's hitting, he should play, and he has bounced back from the kind of season that he had last year before. So that makes good sense. The only thing, I don't know if this means a whole lot, but like if you look at like the trajectory of the last few years, it is up and down a lot. But the one thing he's always had is like the high end EVs. And last year, like his max EV was about like 2 miles an hour slower than like it had been anytime recently. So I don't know if there was just an injury, that's just kind of random, because he did have fewer like balls in play like to measure that on. But that's kind of something that stands out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Very good to point that out. All right. Back to you, Steve.
Yeah. So I don't know if I've gotten a whole lot, but definitely like someone who does stand out in that range is Mike Soroka, I think. So last year as a starter, he had an 18.5% K minus BB. There was only 8 or so innings pitched, but that would have been like top 20 among qualified pitchers if he had been able to keep that up. Going super late, I think there's has more upside than most in that range, and like has the job, so it's kind of that solid floor with like some ceiling on top of it. So there's not a whole lot of pitchers that are appealing in that range, but he's one that I think stands out a little bit.
Yeah, no, I Soroka kind of similarly to you. I like him. I just don't have that much of him yet. But I'll be interested to see how he looks in the spring too. He might stay cheap throughout draft season. We'll see. So I've got I've got a couple more pitchers. I'll start with Max Meyer of the Marlins, who is a significant innings risk. He's going around pick 390, 395 in recent DCs. He might be going a little bit higher than that as we get closer to opening day, especially if he's looking good in the spring. But he showed a really, really high ceiling at the start of last year, and then injuries caught up with him, as they seem to typically do. But I think he will basically just be in the rotation until he's not healthy, and he's cheap enough that even if that's only 8, 10, 12 starts or something like that, it might still be worth it. But I like the price on Max Meyer going around pick 400.
That's a good one. I know I've seen plenty of like tweets about certain filters. And he's one of those, like, standard, like a bunch of good pitchers, and then it's Max Meyer with, like, if you do it by, I think, ball percent and swinging strike and maybe ground balls or something like that. So it just seems like a good pick in that range. I think I've got like one share, maybe one or two. Like my last one's not great for Fab Leagues, but it's probably the person I had the most in that range. Garrett Clevenger, it's more like a DC play, whereas like good ratios, you can leave him in. You'll probably get a few saves if with a little bit of luck. And it's one of these standard cases where, like, if you think it's going to be a committee or a share of saves, like, why not get the one who's going a lot later? Oftentimes it works out in terms of the value. So I don't know, like, how much appeal he has in like a shallow Fab League, or even like a deeper Fab League, but it's like a nice kind of DC piece.
Yeah, is that it? Yeah, I mean, I wish I had some Clevenger now. Don't have any Clevenger. I got one Griffin Jacks. So I don't know. What do you think? Like 15, 20 saves from Jacks? Take the under on that?
I would take the under on that. I don't know if I have a good reason necessarily, but I did get Jacks, I think, in the meatball, but I'm not sure if I've got them since then. And it might just be like it's messy, kind of mostly stay away. But he's going earlier than I would have thought at the outset of draft season. So that just seems a bit pricey for the level of certainty that we have. Now, if it looks like it's going to be him, more often than not, then I think it works out well for the people who got him at that price. But it's a pretty costly bet to make. Looking at like what a 158 ADP by what I have. I don't know. It's a little too early for that, I think.
Yeah, very wise. My last nomination here is Max Meyer's rotation mate, Braxton Garrett, also going around actually he's going quite a bit late. I think he's going like early 400s, mid 400s. And again, coming back from UCL revision surgery. So who knows how he looks early this spring, and I assume he'll be built up in time for opening day, but a lot of risk with Braxton Garrett. But I just think if he is healthy, he's going to pitch in that rotation all season, and he's typically been quite good when he's been healthy. So I think it's a solid bet.
Yeah, the projections, compared to people in that range, like, love him. He really stands out. And I'm not sure how much they're factoring in, like all the time off and so forth, but he's always, like you said, been pretty good. And if he's healthy now, it's not at all a bad shot to take it, whatever pick that is, 400 or almost 450, it looks like. Yeah.
Well, we did it, Steve. Thank you, man. It's been a lot of fun. And got anything else you want to say, or should we call it?
No, nothing comes to mind. Just thanks for having me on. Always good to chat, and I hope that whoever it was that actually asked about me coming on is satisfied with the result.
I got you to give away three late picks, so he can't complain. We did what we came here to do. Steve, best of luck in the rest of your drafts, and especially in your 500 DC auction. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun in that one, as I will in mine. And I look forward to seeing you in Vegas, man. Thanks again for coming on.
All right. Thank you.